Ken Summers, thank you very much. It was a pleasure, Ken, for me to share the platform with you in Loveland, Senator Lundberg's home turf, the other day for National Day of Prayer and the Northern Colorado prayer breakfast. When Andrews and Summers were both in the General Assembly, it was said that when it comes to making public policy or passing legislation, neither of us had a prayer. But we showed them that day, didn't we, Ken? They don't do it for the big bucks. 65 of our fellow citizens serve in the State House of Representatives on 2-year terms with a term limit of a total of 8. 35 of our fellow Coloradans serve in the State Senate, a 4-year term, a limit of 8 years. And the compensation is meager. It requires juggling one's livelihood or having family resources where there's another income or savings of some sort. It's really a sacrificial commitment that these 100 of our fellow Coloradans make to help be stewards of the laws, not just a fat book, but a fat, long shelf of statutes, of the Colorado Revised Statutes, under a relatively thin, although still much thicker than the United States, Constitution. I talk about it with feeling because it was a great honor for me to serve there for 6 years plus, from 1998 to 2005, and we're honored now at Colorado Christian University to renew a tradition that we've done not every year, but almost every year in the 7 years now of Centennial Institute as a public policy think tank here on the CCU campus. That is to invite legislators in both houses and both parties to share some thoughts about what was accomplished for we the people by these, our 100 elected legislators in the session just concluded. We're joined this evening on behalf of the Democratic majority in the Colorado House of Representatives by Assistant Majority Leader Dominick Moreno, elected from Commerce City in Adams County. He was elected in 2012. This is consequently his second term in the General Assembly, and his colleagues have honored him with that leadership post. Giving the perspective from the Republican minority in the State House of Representatives will be State Representative Polly Lawrence of Southern Douglas County and Teller County. She too was elected in 2012. It's her second of four allowed terms in the State House of Representatives, and she again is in leadership as the Assistant Minority Leader. And on behalf of the Colorado Senate, he's going to have to do a split personality act tonight because we thought we had a Democrat representing the Senate minority. Andy Kerr, our local elected state senator from Lakewood here, was on tap and then was unable to come, and we were unable to have a replacement for him on short notice. But we're very honored that State Senator Kevin Lundberg, the Assistant Majority Leader of the newly installed Colorado Senate Republican majority, just as of this past January, will give a report on his perspective from the Senate. And Senator Lundberg, we really want to ask you to do a voice impression of how your counterpart, perhaps a Morgan Carroll or a Lucia Guzman, would have represented the whole thing. You can just be you tonight, so relax.
Well, that sounds good.
We'll ask Representative Moreno to go first. We're just going to have a brief opening statement of reflections on gains and losses from the session, what got done, what got left undone, sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Opening statement from each of the three, and then we'll get into some dialogue amongst them. I'll be the moderator of that, and then we'll see what questions and comments all of you may have. But please start us off, Representative Dominick Moreno.
Thank you very much, and thank you all so much for having me. Since Senator Lundberg will be representing both sides, I'm more than happy to help you get in touch with your liberal side. I need help with that. So my name is Dominick Moreno. I represent Commerce City and Southern Adams County in the State House, and very honored to represent the area where I was born and raised, where I grew up and where my parents live, and all of my immediate family. Actually, it's kind of funny when folks ask how did you get elected at such a young age. I said, well, I'm actually really related to about half the people in my district, so just talk to my family. But I was very fortunate. I went to one of the public schools there in Adams County and got a great scholarship, got the Daniels Fund Scholarship, and went to Georgetown University on a near full ride scholarship, and got very involved in community service when I was in college. It was always really important to me, and graduated with a degree in American government, and decided after my parents begged me to come back home, and moved into their basement just like every other college graduate these days. And that's when I got a Facebook message from a friend I went to high school with, and she said, you should think about running for office. And I never thought anyone would vote for a 24-year-old that lived in his parents' basement, but they did, and I'm here. I won a seat on the city council about a year after graduating from college, and then went on and 3 years later ran for the state house, and now serve in that capacity, and have loved every second of my time there. My big concentration since getting down to the Capitol has actually been on really social justice, on the community service and social justice values that I learned from the Jesuits when I was in college. And so the first bill that I ran when I was elected was to provide more breakfast, more universal breakfast to kids in low-income schools. We all know that kids learn better when they are well-fed. And there are some families, there are some households that simply can't afford to provide their kids breakfast in the morning. And so I ran a bill to now require high poverty districts where poverty is especially concentrated to offer universal breakfast to all kids in the morning. And as a result of that legislation, 80,000 more kids in Colorado are starting their day with breakfast and able to learn at their full capacity. I've also worked on issues that I think have just been common sense things. This year I helped, we have a renewable energy mandate in Colorado for both investor-owned utilities, so energy companies like Xcel Energy, but also for rural electric associations. And I spent a lot of time this year helping rural electric associations meet their renewable energy mandate in a way that is beneficial and cost-effective for them. There are a lot of groups that said, we don't want to touch the renewable energy mandate. We passed this perfect bill. And I said, well, if you really think you passed a perfect bill, you clearly don't know how this process works, because there's never a perfect bill. We need to help these communities be able to achieve renewable energy in a very in an efficient and cost-effective way for them. So I spent some time working on that issue as well this year. But this year, I'm sure most are aware, was a divided legislature. The Democrats controlled the House, Republicans controlled the Senate, and in some people's opinions, that's a recipe for success, because you don't get too far one way or too far the other. I don't disagree with that assumption, actually. There's a lot of things that I think we can accomplish, and the best things come out of when you accomplish them together, both Democrats and Republicans working together. And so that's what we saw in a couple of issues this year. A big one was reducing the amount of testing that's going on in our schools. We have come way too far one way, and now a lot of kids are spending a lot of their time taking tests. And so we decided that there was universal agreement there, and that we should really try to do a concerted effort to reduce those numbers of assessments. And as a result, we passed a bill with wide bipartisan support that students will be burdened less, at least by 25% less testing in our schools starting this school year, to make sure that they actually can do the things that they went to school to do, and that's to learn, and to actually enjoy learning, and to give our teachers the ability to actually teach again. We finally reached agreement on making sure that there are appropriate penalties for habitual drunk drivers. For the last few years, we have not been able to pass legislation to make it a felony if someone's been convicted of drunk driving 3 times or more. Now, that's a reality in Colorado. We passed a bill to make sure that if you continually put people at risk by drunk driving, that you're actually going to face a harsher penalty, and it'll actually include jail time, to make sure that our roads are as safe as possible and that people are being protected. So those, I think, are two very broad issues where we were able to reach bipartisan support. But I'll actually turn it over to my counterpart in the House, one of my very good friends, Representative Lawrence, to give her perspective on things.
Now we get to find out if you served in the same session or in two separate.
You know, I'm pretty sure it was the same session. There are a few differences there. Obviously, Dominick and I come from very different backgrounds. I came into the legislature being raised in a family that was very, not necessarily politically active, that they ran for office, but they were very politically aware, always I was raised by parents who said you need to know what the issues are, who the people are that you're going to be voting for, and you need to participate, because if you don't participate, you have no right to complain about the outcomes. So that was kind of how I was raised, and then got married, worked in our family construction company for, gosh, 30 years before I ran for office. And it was really the culmination of seeing regulation upon regulation upon regulation that affected the contracts that I had to put together for a construction company. Whether it was federal mandates, state mandates, my subcontract kept getting thicker and thicker and thicker because I had to add new pieces of paper that complied with new rules and new regulations. And that was really why I ran for office, was just a complete frustration with the political system. So fast forward, get in there, I don't run business bills, which is kind of surprising, even though I support them and I co-sponsor them. But most of my work down there has been involved in privacy and public safety. I was assigned to the Judiciary Committee my freshman year, which was a big surprise because I'm not an attorney, nor do I play one. And when I asked our minority leader at that time, Mark Waller, why he put me on Judiciary, he just said, well, we need somebody who's not an attorney, and you're it. All right. And currently I'm the ranking member for the Judiciary Committee for the Republicans in the House, which again is kind of a scary thing because I do have attorneys on there from our side of the aisle, but it has taught me a lot. That's probably one of the most interesting committees that I could have ever not chosen to be on. I mean, we deal with everything from law enforcement to sentencing of crimes to abortion bills, we heard gun bills, we heard civil unions bills. It's a broad range of topics that we get in the Judiciary Committee. And that has really led me, this year I was the co-chair of the Crime Victims' Rights Caucus for the House. Because sitting in that committee, it became very clear that we have two different attitudes about law enforcement in this state. I am very aware that there are victims to the crimes that are committed, and I've seen a trend with some of our members that it's all about making things easier for the offender. And that was pointed out to me this year by our Judiciary Chairman as he was going around and kind of having fun with each of us at our end of year breakfast and kind of imitating us as we sit in committee. And he was saying that he can always tell as they're going around the room and they're talking about some bill that's going to release felons because they're really good people, they're just misunderstood. And some of the members are wiping away tears because they're so touched by it. And he said, and then I look around and there's Representative Lawrence, and she does not have a poker face and she is not happy. And he said, I know that she is going to say, don't forget about the victims when you're talking about these crimes. So I've run, I ran a bill last year just mandating sentencing for associated assaults when DNA is the identifier on sexual assaults. This year I ran a DNA bill with Representative Dan Pabon, the Speaker Pro Tem. Unfortunately, it did not get out of committee. That is something that I just feel is really important. I mean, DNA is the modern day fingerprint, and it not only helps us identify a criminal, but eliminate those who are not the criminals. I was the House sponsor on the protections for unborn children, otherwise termed the fetal homicide bill. that came about after the horrific death of Aurora Wilkins earlier this year. And I don't run social issue bills, but to me that was a law enforcement bill. That was a victims' rights bill. And it was important to me to run that piece of legislation because those babies who are killed in a violent act against their mother have no voice. And the legislation that was passed previously specifically omitted their voice in the crimes against pregnant women. It will recognize injury to the mother, but it will not recognize injury to the baby. And it passed out of the Senate and was unfortunately killed in the House committee in a hearing that was rushed beyond belief. It was at the end of session, so we were running short on time. The chairman of that committee gave my witnesses 30 seconds per witness. Unacceptable. For something that important, that should never happen. To some of the bills that Dominick had mentioned, there was great bipartisan work on the school, on the school assessment, yeah, 1323 covered a lot of different things. It allows parents to opt their kids out of the park testing without any penalties associated with that. It really brought a lot of different bills that were worked on during the session together in one package. And it was absolutely a bipartisan effort between the House Republicans and Democrats and the Senate Republicans and Democrats. So I think it was a good step forward for education and assessments across the state. It's not a fix, but it moves it incrementally in what I believe is the right direction. I think for the most part, it was a pretty productive session. I mean, obviously, because we have a split legislature, the extremes on both sides are killed in one chamber or the other. So you come to bills that really bring consensus between the two parties. They're going to leave a lot of people unhappy, but for the most part, I think it brings us probably very well-balanced legislation for the state of Colorado, and nothing that is damaging or extreme like what I would say we saw in my first session down there. So it was definitely different than my first session, and a lot less stressful, which was nice.
Thank you, Representative Lawrence. What about the Senate perspective, Senator Lundberg?
Well, first, just a little bit of introduction on myself, as my colleagues have done. John made reference to the fact that the school here graduated their 100th class last Saturday, and my daughter was among that, and I'm a proud father, of course. But I would also point out, in my background, that 41 years ago, I received my diploma right over on that lawn there. And that was...
because there were no buildings on the campus.
Yeah, well, you got to start someplace, you know. None big enough for the ceremony, that's for sure. But I did attend here, and that really was formative in my development, as well as the other thing in my background that I think is most significant is my wife and I, we taught our kids at home. We homeschooled, and we got involved in that arena. That's actually how I first met John many years ago. He had a little round table of political activists that would meet about once a month, and I was invited to that because I was active within the homeschool arena, and learned an awful lot about education, about the political systems, and realized that maybe I could serve in this capacity. And when the time was right, I was able to run for office and be successful. Okay, it took 4 years, but nonetheless, to get in the position of helping to craft the laws that we have for our state. This year was a very unique opportunity for myself. It's the first year I've served officially in a leadership position. I am the chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee, vice chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and of course serve as the assistant majority leader, which basically means I'm the gopher for the majority leader. You know, when he gets a little too busy on something, he'll hand me a sheaf of papers and say, "Here, go figure this out," or something like that. And it's been a real honor and a real privilege to watch all of the mechanisms. When you are in leadership, in the majority, you have to govern. You can't lob, you know, rhetorical hand grenades around. You really have to figure out, okay, what needs to get done and how can we get it done. And we were successful, I believe, in the Senate in fulfilling that responsibility, despite all of the bills that the House threw our way. But, you know, the downside of a split legislature is, I would not characterize it as the extremes as much as there are differing political philosophies. There are really two major philosophies, and there are two major parties. And in the one party, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just not feeling the vibe shit on the liberal side, is more government, more control, more management of the individual citizen from the aggregate whole that we call civil government. And somewhat less on the Republican side, and I say somewhat less because I fear there are far too many bills that the Republicans support that really go down that same road, that set up, you know, one more regulatory mechanism for this industry and bump the costs up a little higher here. And I would be a libertarian if a libertarian philosophy wasn't really more agnostic in its philosophical perspective. But I do believe that government that governs best governs least, and that is a major goal for me. So in a split legislature, here's the good news: less gets done, which is better. Unfortunately, some ideas don't move forward that I believe should. Representative Lawrence mentioned the fetal homicide bill that I believe should have gotten a fair hearing and a fair decision. Unfortunately, it came strictly down party lines. And that was an exhibition of extreme perspective that I should hope we will not repeat. Because we did not do justice to the unborn children in any way whatsoever. I had a bill for educational tax credits to provide more choice for students and for parents, which I believe is the key to the issues we wrestle with when it comes to the government's role in education. And I come from that from the background of a great deal of experience within education, but not just the public school side of it. And I believe there's much that we can learn from the other formats that work very well, private school and homeschool. So some things didn't work, but we got the budget put together. Yeah, you might say, well, you always do that. Yes, but it gained more traction this year. As a matter of fact, in the Senate, when it came for final adoption, at the end, I believe it was unanimous, and I've never seen that, ever.
I never saw that.
I believe it was for the final vote. Now, the first time the Senate voted, there were a few naysayers on the Democrat side. But when it came back at the final, I believe, if memory serves me correctly, in any event, it was the most harmonious budget system that I've seen in my 13 years down in the legislature. So there were some positives in that respect. And I will shut up and wait for more interaction at other points here.
Well, I told you wouldn't be required to channel Senator Morgan Carroll or Senator Lucia Guzman or Senator Raleigh Heath or some of your Democratic counterparts, but
I can mimic Raleigh Heath, though. He takes his glasses off and he says, you know, I just can't quite get there. That's the end of it, though.
What I did want to invite you to do is set the players for the benefit of folks in the audience that don't follow the legislature as closely, that aren't down there on a daily basis. Who are the Republican leaders in the ranks above yourself, the the president and majority leader, and who are the Democratic leaders, and say a little bit about the dynamics amongst those leaders with power having changed hands just in the last election. So
it is an interesting thing, and of course John served as the president of the Senate at one time as well, so we certainly appreciate some of the dynamics. But on the Republican side, we've got President Bill Cadman, and then Majority Leader Mark Scheffel, and then myself, and then and a few others who are in the spots below that. Then on the Democrat side, it's Morgan Carroll is the minority leader, and then let's see, Raleigh Heath, he is the assistant minority leader. Last year, that was the president and the majority leader. So, and last year, Cadman was the minority leader and Scheffel was the assistant minority leader. So they literally have reversed roles. And I'm sure that that created a great deal of frustration at times for those who have less authority this year, you know, for Carroll and Heath. But it's actually been an advantage in one way, and that is everybody knows the ropes. You know, nobody's struggling to figure out what their role is because they've seen it, and actually there are times when, you know, literally on a procedural thing that doesn't have any political implications, we might look over to Morgan and they'll say, well, yeah, you're supposed to do this, this, and this.
If you had to grade it on a report card A through F, and as far as amicable, mutually respectful cooperation with power having changed hands?
It depends on the issue. Honestly, I would say that it is a very amicable structure and system that we have on average. But when a really hot issue comes up, yeah, it can turn, you know, nuclear very, very quickly. And we've had a few moments, especially in the last week, because that's when the maneuvering occurs. And there are things that in the minority, you can slow things down, but you can't stop anything. And so you learn, you know, to act like molasses, and sometimes that means being hard to get along with, you know, losing your temper, or maybe looking like it at least. And so there's a little bit of that. There really is. It's some of the dynamics. You know, it's an interesting.
I would interject this. Anytime on an NBA basketball court or an NFL football game that you see a player perhaps not really hurt but faking it because it buys a little time, or there's an effort to get a penalty that they didn't really have coming, that has been known to be played out in different ways in the dynamics of legislative gamesmanship too. I'll never forget when one of our Senate members in the Republican side, I believe we were in the minority and we were stalling, and this individual was taken with an unexplained sudden stomach ailment of some sort. It was never medically diagnosed. Let's just leave it there. Representative Moreno, how about setting the leadership ranks on the majority House side, and then we'll let Representative Lawrence do the same on the minority House side. Who else is in leadership with you there?
So on the House Majority side, we have Speaker Dickie Lee Hollinghorst. She is from Boulder, and Majority Leader Crisanta Duran from Denver. So I certainly relate to Senator Lundberg's scenario where he's handed a piece of paper and say, hey, go figure this out. But usually mine says, get me a cup of coffee too. So
I don't do that.
I think we work pretty well as a team on our side. And Dickie Lee Hollinghorst, for those of you who do not know her, is about a lady about 5'3", but can pack a legislative punch. That's for sure. She doesn't take any prisoners. So
I served with the first woman Speaker of the Colorado House ever, and that was Lois Spradley of Fremont County, and on the Republican side. And I believe Speaker Hollinghorst is the first woman to be a Democrat to be Speaker of the House, right?
That's correct.
And what about leadership ranks on your side, Paul?
Well, we have Representative Brian Del Grosso from Loveland is our minority leader. He was also the minority leader. He took over halfway through the last session because our original one, Mark Waller, was running for AG, so he resigned that leadership position. We put Brian in that position, and he's done a phenomenal job. He and I spent a lot of time last summer. In fact, we're kind of referred to as work husband and wife because we always went everywhere together. You know, raising money and working on campaigns last summer, and got to know each other very well and work very well together. So it's been, I think, a pretty successful year from my point of view.
And it's 35 Democrats, 30 Republicans in the chamber. Is that the head count now?
34, 31.
34, 31. So were there a couple of races last November that came within a few hundred votes of changing it?
There were, I think, 3. There, boy, it was tantalizing. For about a day and a half, I thought we might be in the majority, and Brian and I were scheming, trying to figure out who we put on committees, how we're going to run our leadership, and then poof, it was gone.
Well, speaking of that, Representative Moreno, it wasn't so much the case in the Senate because not everybody ran every 2 years, but in your chamber, how much does politics enter in, even in an odd-numbered year like 2015? How much on your side are they thinking about setting up such and such a member who maybe had a tight win last time, or trying to get somebody on record on the other side with a vote that you could use against them in a campaign? How much of that goes on?
That happens a fair amount, honestly. The House runs every 2 years, so you're constantly in election mode in the House side, and so those things happen exactly as you said. You know, I've gotten used to never carrying the really good legislation, because you got to give that legislation to someone in a targeted district because they got to go home and campaign on it. And then you know, same thing on the other side. If someone's in a tight race, sometimes you wait till they cast a wrong vote, or like a vote that you can use against them in the next election.
I'd like to give each of you a moment to reflect on this question so that you can give me a name that you've thoughtfully considered. You've already heard Representative Moreno start at the very beginning by saying that he considers Representative Lawrence a good friend. And those of you that haven't served down there, Representative Summers and I will remember this from our first-hand experience. Truly, you make friendships you make probably more friends amongst members of your own party and then in your own chamber that you serve in. But friendships transcend which chamber you're in or even which party you're in. And there is, when I asked the question when it could get scratchy in the Senate after power changed hands, Kevin, there is a tradition of civility that is quite gratifying to participate in or to even observe from the outside, that people can get really fierce and passionate about the merits of an issue. And I wish I could win this vote, and I wish I could win over your vote. And yet it's not with personal enmity or animosity very much of the time. So what I want to invite each of you to do is to name someone in the opposite party that present company accepted that you really find gratifying to serve with, that you respect how they do what they do, not just because you can necessarily get their vote. Maybe you've never gotten their vote, but a colleague across the aisle that you would really respect. Kevin, you want to start with that one?
Well, actually, several come to mind, which might surprise some people as to who they would be, because the first one I would mention would be actually Morgan Carroll. That we found some common ground on Fourth Amendment issues that have really...
that being unreasonable search and seizure, the security of my private property? Yeah,
the security of the individual, you know, against the intrusion of the state, if you will. Or another one in a more general sense is Senator Newell, that I've worked with quite a bit. As a matter of fact,
Linda Newell of Littleton?
Yeah, Linda and I took on the drone bill that Polly sent our way, that we just couldn't.
It was not a drone bill, although it started out that way.
Yeah, it started out that way. But I've worked with her on quite a bit. We actually did get one bill passed moving the Child Welfare Ombudsman's office from the executive branch to the judiciary branch, which is a really big deal because the governor hated it. And yet we got it through, and I think he's going to allow it to become law. But there we found some common ground, and we'll continue to work on some of the issues, including the non-drone bill.
It's coming back. I've already pulled the title.
What about you? Someone across the aisle that you enjoy and respect?
You know, I had the opportunity to run a bill with the speaker this year and found her to be really a pleasure to work with. Obviously,
bill?
It was kind of revamping the Urban Renewal Authority, bringing that back into line and giving counties, school districts, and special districts a voice in how their tax dollars would be used for those special projects that a city may decide is awesome. And right now they can just take the taxes from those three entities, and we said that shouldn't happen. They should have a voice in how
The
that
bill
works.
succeeded?
It did.
Did she approach you, or did you approach her with the bill?
Actually, the counties approached both of us and asked us to work together. They wanted to have leadership members on that bill, and so the two of us signed on to it, and she was actually very good to work with. She had great ideas, really very proactive in what she does. I have also run a couple of bills with Dan Pabone and found him to be he can really annoy me sometimes. But I still enjoy working with him. He has great ideas, and he has a very good political instincts, and has brought some very interesting law enforcement victims' rights bills that I feel very strongly about supporting.
Thank you. All right. Representative Moreno, your chance to throw a bouquet to a Republican.
Well, I will say, the annoying piece about Representative Pabone, that's not limited to the Republican side.
He's feeling the love wherever he is tonight.
But I've very much enjoyed serving with Representative Dan Lundberg from Colorado Springs. We represent polar opposite districts. His is 3-to-1 Republican, mine is 3-to-1 Democrat. But we both found a common interest in really loving good food. And so when we're in session, we will go and share a meal about once a week at a new restaurant and just trying things out. My only regret is that he can eat whatever he wants and never have it show, and I cannot. So that's the one point that I
The other thing you may regret is that some of us who served before Amendment 41 was put in the state constitution, we could eat those wonderful meals and lobbyists would buy them for us. Not that way anymore. Maybe it's better that it's not that way anymore. What about questions or comments from any of you? Let's start with my friend Dan Kors, please.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Speak out, Dan.
I haven't followed this as closely as I should have, but what I was wondering is what happened with the construction defects bill, and maybe give some background and kind of where it might be going.
Yeah, why was there a construction defects bill, and why didn't it succeed? We'll start with that one, Dominick.
Sure. So just a broad overview of the construction defects issue. So right now, there are instances in which people's homes over time, or their condos, eventually show some signs of defects, and whether that be through the construction or that just be through the passage of time. Either way, right now, Colorado homeowners have, in law, an ability to sue a developer if they have defects in their home. And one of the issues being that many developers have come to the legislature and said that we have an environment that is too litigious, it is too easy to bring a lawsuit, and that is preventing us from building more owner-occupied housing in the Denver metro area. And you see it through just the statistics. Right now you see all the buildings going up in downtown Denver, those are all rentals. None of those are owner-occupied. And developers have said it's because they are too prone to liability to build those owner-occupied homes. And so the issue being that, where some folks disagree about this, I happen to be on the side that I think there is too much liability and we should work on this issue. But there are folks that believe that this is the most valuable or the most important investment people make in their entire life, is to buy their home. And that if there are legitimate defects on that property, they should have some recourse to get that property fixed. And so the issue there being is where are we? Have we gone to one side too much? And so the bill that was brought this year would have established a supermajority of homeowners that have to sign on before they can actually bring a claim against a developer. That was one piece of it. It had a lot of other moving parts. I didn't follow it too closely because it was on the Senate side and then came to the House and didn't make it out of committee. But that's really the broad issue there. But it did pass the Senate with bipartisan support, but was killed in a House committee.
Comments?
Yeah, if I could build on that a little bit. I was at a similar event this morning, and Minority Leader Brian Del Grosso was there, and he put it in a little blunter terms. He said the trial lawyers had him killed in the House. And, you know, even Habitat for Humanity was begging for this legislation, because anybody who puts multiple family units together understands that it's financially irresponsible to actually sell it to somebody. Because I believe it only takes 2 residents to initiate a lawsuit. Well, imagine if you build a condominium complex that has 100 units in it, and somebody gets disgruntled and they find a neighbor, and suddenly you've got a lawsuit on your hands. So as a consequence, Dominick is quite correct. Nobody builds condominiums in Colorado because it is financially impossible. We need to find a solution, and we have a solution that did come out of the Senate, and much to the credit of my colleague Mark Shuffle, Majority Leader Shuffle, who really has been working on this for a long time, and yet we couldn't get there.
Did it go party line in the Senate?
No, it was, as Dominick said, it was a bipartisan effort. You know, I mean, there were some who were saying no, but we had a good, strong majority vote on that, and it looked like it was headed the right way. But when it got to the House, it got ambushed by the special interest group that would lose, and that's the trial lawyers.
You went in on this as a business lawyer, Representative Lawrence?
Well, I would just say right now the trial lawyers aren't making any money on this because we're not building condos.
That's important.
And one of the arguments that I heard, and I was on a panel with the speaker over the summer, and she didn't support the construction defects bill. To me, I mean, that is your first opportunity to buy a house for a lot of people. It's your first opportunity to own property. When my husband and I got married, he had a condo. That was his first real estate purchase. That then we traded up to a house, and then we traded up to another house. And taking that opportunity away from people, I mean, that is affordable housing. That is the first step. And I think that is an argument that we need to continue to make, because that was part of the reason why it didn't get out of the House committee, was that a couple of the members didn't see that as truly affordable housing. And I don't know if it's because they're thinking of government affordable housing or individual affordable housing, but it's your first step into home ownership and actually building individual wealth. And I think it's an important piece of legislation. It's something that the state of Colorado needs. And if we don't get that under control at the legislature, then we're going to have cities writing their own rules, and we're going to have a patchwork of regulations across the state.
I'll tell you how long this has been a bipartisan issue, at least in the Senate. 1999, the first session that I served down there, then Jefferson County State Senator Ed Perlmutter, now a congressman from Jefferson County, and I were together on a construction defects mitigation bill that met the same fate. It couldn't quite pull the majority together despite some bipartisan support, because there's something to be said for America's tort system, the liability system, by way of disciplining actors in the private sector as an alternative to government regulation, disciplining them. But on the other hand, sometimes that gets carried a little too far. Let's see what other issues there are.
If I could make one more point on this issue. I don't think a developer ever goes into business to make a shoddy product. I just don't think that happens. And it's my opinion that when those instances happen, you should give that developer the opportunity to correct their mistake. That seems pretty common sense to me. But when I brought that up, it met more force against it than the bill did that we were talking about this session. And so I guess in some instances, common sense goes out the door.
Just by way of helping people understand the process, Representative Moreno, do you remember what committee did it go to? Did the Speaker assign it to the so-called kill committee, or a committee which would take it up more substantively for a hearing?
It did go to the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, which is the kill.
The graveyard.
Yes.
Where good or bad bills go to die. Pam?
Our city in Littleton, it's an older city, and we have more older residents, and we have a lot of young people. We have a 24-year-old that would love to stay in his community, but because of the defects bill, and we have a very unbalanced home market in Littleton, people who want to come, our young people who want to come and live in the state of Colorado, live in their communities, and be part of that community and be vibrant. This defects bill prevents them from even buying property. And since you are a younger person in the legislature, I would encourage you to talk to your other Democrats on that side of the aisle and point out that they're preventing our young people from being a part of their communities, putting down roots in their communities that they may want to do, and it's preventing them from doing so. They may not want to be a renter. So I would ask that, would you be willing to sign on to this bill and bring it back the next session? And with that in mind, that you are speaking as a voice for the young people who want to be put down roots back into their communities and keep those communities vibrant.
So I'll just say...
No pressure, but we are making you this vote for your whole generation.
Well, I completely agree with you, actually. For most people my age, you have to have those entry-level home prices in order to actually get a start. And a lot of those are condos. And so, like I said, I'm more than open to having this discussion on this issue. And the bill actually had Democratic and Republican sponsorship in the House, but still was killed. And so we're going to continue to work on it, and I imagine the bill will be brought back again next session so we can continue this dialogue.
Other issues? Mike?
Yes, I'd like your comments on the para bond issue. I know that was killed in the Senate Finance Committee, but I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that particular bill.
Who are you looking at? All three of us?
All three of them, yes.
Let me kick this one off. The PARA, the Public Employees Retirement Association? Or Association, okay. Anyway, it's the retirement plan for public employees in Colorado, is underfunded. It doesn't have quite enough money to actually fulfill all of the long-term liabilities that are there. And so this was a very creative notion to address that cash flow problem by, it's underfunded by what, 10, $20 billion, it all depends on a lot of factors, but somewhere in that range. 25 billion, okay. Well, this will cure it by simply borrowing an additional 10 billion against it. That was the deal. And then to borrow the money at 4% and figure you're going to make 7% in the stock market. And understand, you borrow the money, the reason it's 4% is these are tax-free bonds. So you're really gaming the federal and the state income tax system to get this cheap money, if you will. But then you're also setting up this liability of additional $10 billion on PARA. So if things went south and instead we owed the money and weren't making anything on it, now we have that much more of a dilemma to deal with. Obviously, I thought it was a given. And yet it was put forward by some supposedly really smart people. They call it arbitrage. This might be a shrewd way to leverage some dollars and make some money somewhere, but not with the pension plan for the state's employees. we need to face up to two realities. One is para. The basic one is para needs to be able to live within its means, which means we have to set up a mechanism where it is properly funded and the benefits match that funding mechanism. Right now, it's not.
Arbitrage, for any of you that don't know, it's a French term which means I took my baby's college savings to the Ameristar Casino in Blackhawk.
There you go.
And tripled them, and everybody lived happily ever after. Other comments on the para bond bill?
Well, I have some experience with what you just said, because it took me till I was about 18 to figure out when my mom said she was going up the hill. She didn't mean to the mountains, she meant to Blackhawk. But you know, just on this issue, I agree para's underfunded, and you know, the retirement system, both federally and at the state level, is a mess. And I have no illusions that Social Security will even be there when I get to retirement age, but that's a whole nother issue. But para, we heard it described as this is refinancing your mortgage while low, interest rates are low. And I know it was far more complex than that, but that is the message that we got, was that you would then refinance and then you'd be able to take advantage of that lower interest rate. You know, at the end of the day, for me, you know, the retirees, when they support something, I think they don't take that lightly, because at the end of the day, it's their benefits that are on the line. And so, and the retirees as an organization did support that bill. And so I thought it came way too late in session for an issue as complex as it was. But I think at least started a conversation about the fact that para is underfunded and that we need to figure out a solution to the problem.
Well, I joke about risky gambling, but the fact is, among others, if I'm not mistaken, State Treasurer Walker Stapleton, whom I regard as a Republican conservative overall and a fiscal conservative and a sharp pencil with our public dollars, supported it. So I'm eager to talk to the chairman and understand it a little better, because you can tell I was skeptical of it too. What else do we have here? Professor Watson.
I'm a professor here at CCU, Bill Watson. My greatest concern is that gay rights will trump religious freedom, and I actually expect sometime very soon for CCU to be sued because we have a lifestyle covenant. The gay lifestyle cannot be practiced here. And I think we better get some lawyers, because I think it's going to happen. I also think that churches will be persecuted for this because they won't perform gay marriages. I know we have a First Amendment, but I fear that people want to strip that away from us. And I'm actually telling Christians to be prepared to go to prison for your faith, like John Bunyan did in the 17th century.
Comments there? Very serious, profound issue.
Well, I believe one of our members, Representative Klingenschmidt, brought a bill that was somewhat addressing religious freedom in the state last year. I think it's an issue, as we've seen what happened in Indiana, and we recognize that there are religious freedom bills that are in states across the country that have never been challenged before, but suddenly they are. It's a fine line that we need to make sure that we're ready to defend, because we do have a right to free speech. We do have a right to freedom of religion. And to me, that has been twisted in the lexicon of most Americans. When they think of the First Amendment, it's freedom from religion. And I'm always there saying, no, it's freedom of religion. The state cannot tell you what religion to practice. You have the freedom to choose for yourself. And that's something that we need to hold very dear. And it is, I believe, you're probably correct, it is going to be a fine line that we need to walk, because you're going to hear an argument that it's discrimination rather than freedom of speech and freedom of religion. And so it's a needle that we're going to have to thread carefully through the legislative process. Unfortunately, I don't think it should come to that, but I think it probably will.
What else, Senator Lundberg?
Yeah, I'd like to dive in on that one as well, from a little bit different take on it. This is really the vortex of the culture clash that we have today. understand this, RFRAs, Religious Freedom and Restoration Acts, were put together 20 years ago, roughly speaking, in order to address a very different issue than what has been brought to bear on it in this past year. Really, I think the homosexual agenda has taken this issue hostage in many ways, but represents a more fundamental problem or dilemma we have in our culture, because there really are two perspectives, and one is holding fast to those principles that our nation was founded on. You know, I can spend the next hour describing to you how our nation was founded on the premise that we do everything with a profound respect for the supreme ruler of the universe, which is a pretty close paraphrase to the preamble to the Colorado Constitution. And yet today, somehow that wants to be, many want to throw that out and say, no, we want to ignore the fact that there are immutable moral principles and laws that were established by God. And in order to presume that, you accept the very existence and the authority of God. And what I see down at the legislature is those who want to set that entirely aside and follow a path that replaces that value with a secular humanism. And that's the real issue, and that's why it very much may come to bear. Even though I want to say to anybody who wants to take any perspective other than the acknowledgement of God in the public arena, that you best find a different nation, because this nation was founded on that principle, and it is so clear in every level that you're trying to redefine the entire world around your new set of values, and that's not a part of this country.
How do you see this, Representative Moreno?
A little differently, but I think it's going to be an issue that we continue to wrestle with. And I have no issue with religious freedom whatsoever. It is one of the founding principles of this country. But the reality is that, and I would never, we passed a civil unions law in Colorado, and all throughout, the intention there was to never require institutions of faith to adhere or to require them to comply with that law. Because that is your right as a person of faith, whether or not you recognize a civil union. But the reality is that there is the religious side of our society, and there is the public government side of our society. And I'm just one that always believes that we should never discriminate against people in the public accommodations and public sphere of society. And so I know it's going to be a line that continues to get blended, and we're going to continue to wrestle with it. But for me, that's where I draw the line, is there should never be any discrimination on the public side.
You mentioned your Jesuit-led education at Georgetown. Do you consider yourself a person of faith?
I do, yeah.
Carl Hoops.
Yes. As a follow-on to that subject, if Justice Kennedy...
Take the mic so we get it on record, please.
Carl Hoops. If Justice Kennedy should very regrettably decide to write an opinion redefining marriage, what could we, as a state of Colorado, do to uphold our amendment, our Constitution, which states that marriage is between a man and a woman? Would we have any ability to protect our Constitution in the rights of Christians and traditional marriage proponents?
Three non-lawyers, have at it.
I rush into this where those who are probably wiser don't, but I have and I shall continue, because I'm not sure that's the only watershed decision, but that certainly continues to rush us down that road. And to me, it's even a little more less certain what happens if the Supreme Court says, no, you're right, the state should be making this decision, because for the state of Colorado, it was made de facto because the Supreme Court refused to hear the issue when the 10th Circuit made the decision to insist that Colorado be issuing marriage licenses. But if the Supreme Court capitulates and simply says, okay, whatever, and puts that in place, I would submit this to you, and that is that our nation has now lost sight of that fundamental institution called marriage entirely. And if that is the case, then those of us who hold fast to that being an immutable biblical principle that eclipses government policy have to just live with the fact that we would then be living in a country that has abandoned the concept of marriage and the family. And it's not a matter of accommodating and taking a little step further and further. No, we have to say, no, this is nuts, this is wrong. And am I calling for a revolution? No, I'm just calling for a personal understanding that the nation is so far away from what the truth is that we live in a foreign land.
Well,
yes.
And I'll say, our Colorado Constitution says a lot of things. It says that you can't hunt bears in the springtime. It says that people can now grow marijuana. It says a lot of things that it shouldn't. The Constitution is a framework for governance, or at least that's what it should be. And that's not what it is in Colorado today. And I trust that the Supreme Court are really guardians of what is constitutional and what is not. And so if the Supreme Court comes back and says that discrimination in civil marriage is unconstitutional, then I would obviously support and respect that decision.
Representative Lawrence?
Well, I'm of the belief that marriage is between one man and one woman. It says that on my website. That's just my fundamental belief. I heard the civil unions bill, my first session in the Judiciary Committee, and it was presented by then Speaker of the House, and I just lost Ferrandino. Thank you, Mark. And when I gave my statement on why I was a no vote, he asked me afterwards if that was truly why I was a no, and I said yes. I don't have anything against my friends who are gay or lesbian, I don't. But I do believe that marriage is between one man and one woman, and we need to make sure that our religious institutions are still free to practice that tenet, because that is what, that's what humanity is built on, is one man and one woman coming together and creating families and populating the earth, and that's how it's done. And if we infringe on the religious rights of those institutions, then we have really overstepped our bounds and changed this country fundamentally forever.
I want to wrap up here, and I want to invite our three legislative panelists to gather their thoughts about a call to action to several dozen of us here gathered this evening. There's lots of other things we could be doing on a lovely evening in May, and we're here to think about the work you do for us on behalf of 5 million Coloradans to govern our state as fairly and thoughtfully and wisely as you can amidst all the differing perspectives of what that, how that translates, what that means. This very issue we're talking about is an example. I'd also invite you, by way of a closing statement, not only to give us a call to action, that you would challenge friends in this room to help you legislate better by us being citizens better, and tell us what that would look like. But in addition, if you could change or improve the way the whole process works, just offer a thought or two about that. And here's a couple of things that have led me into that. We talked earlier about the trial lawyers and their role in preventing year after year the construction defects reform legislation from going through. Our lobby's too powerful, but then again, some say lobbying itself is inherently compromised, corrupt activity. Where is the balance? What is lobbying okay, but are some lobbies too powerful? What about media coverage of the institution in which the three of you serve? You mentioned your colleague, Republican of Colorado Springs, Gordon Klingenschmidt, Polly Lawrence. The whole state, and indeed the whole country, for a couple of days heard this man's jaw-breaking German name in connection with some ill-considered remarks that he made applying his view of Scripture to the tragedy of that woman and her baby, Aurora Wilkins, who was already mentioned. And yet, it must frustrate you. It did me at a time when there were two newspapers in Denver, and each of them was much thicker than today's Denver Post. And still, there wasn't as much coverage of the legislature and a fair, thoughtful, ongoing tracking of the work that we were trying to do down there, the work you now are doing. What about the media? How could it be better? And a third angle would be just about public awareness, or its opposite, public cluelessness about the legislature. Have any of you ever been asked to get White House tour tickets for a constituent because they thought you serve in Washington, D.C.? It really happened to me. Again and again, people would say, how's everything in Congress? I'd say, well, your guess is as good as mine. So thoughts about how the institution and the process works overall. Churchill said it's the worst ever invented, except for the others that have been tried. And then any sort of a call to action or challenge or appeal that you would make to us to be on your team as citizens to help you do a better job when the legislature convenes again. Let's go in the kind of the reverse order from which we went at the beginning and start with you, Senator.
Okay. I'm not sure I can cover every point that you asked for, John, in the amount of time, but let me hit 3 points that really come to my mind. First, a little bit of a play off of what I'd said a few moments ago. I don't want to be misunderstood. I believe that it's our responsibility, all of us as citizens, and particularly those who adhere to biblical standards, to be supportive of their government as to the greatest degree possible. You know, the Apostle Paul, and when he spoke of the Roman tyranny that surrounded him, said, obey the leaders so that you might live a peaceable life. And I believe we have that responsibility as well. When it comes to what we should do, the call to action, I look around the room and I see people who are already involved in the action. But this is what I would exhort you to do more of, because in reference to the special interests that do drive, I believe, too much in the legislature, on both sides of the aisle, it drives me crazy when a good idea comes up and then it dies, or it gets side-railed, or it gets passed if it's a bad idea, but so-and-so who poured a whole lot of money into the last campaign wants it to be so it is. Well, how do you counteract that? You can't legislate it away. But what you can do is you can overwhelm it with your own action as citizens. And we've got to do that. We have got to be as proactive as possible because it's our lives. I'll button it up this way. When I first ran for office, I said I ran because I had 3 kids, and I wanted to see a better world for them. And I believed it was my responsibility as a dad not just to provide for their daily resources, but to put things in order as much as possible. That charge is before each one of us. We need, and I believe we can, make a significant difference if we become the special interest, we the people. That's the way it was envisioned in 1787. We the people. We the people need to be at the top of the of the political feeding chain, you might say, rather than just watching helplessly on the side. I believe we can, and we can overwhelm the media too,
especially with new technology.
That's my point. Yep.
Representative Lawrence.
Well, thank you very
Closing
much.
Thoughts.
I would say probably one of the biggest changes in media is that now everybody follows one another on Twitter. So you have, what, 140 characters? I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to get your news in 140-some characters, you're not going to get the whole story. And we do have reporters down there, but unless it's a juicy tidbit or something really controversial, you're not going to see it in the paper. And that's where I see really a breakdown in our legislative process and educating the public on what we're doing down there. You know, when I grew up, my parents took both papers. We got the news in the morning and the Post in the afternoon. And you read to see what was going on at the Capitol in D.C. You knew who your candidates were, you knew what the issues were, and you just don't have that sort of information anymore. Even though we have a 24-hour news cycle, it's, you know, where's the latest storm? Where's the latest, you know, Inflategate in the NFL? I mean, that's the big story. It's not what's going on with your legislature. It's not the regulations that are being passed that are being imposed on people across the country. And I would also say, and this was brought to my attention this year very clearly with a student discipline reporting bill that I ran, that term limits have resulted in empowering mid-level bureaucrats in Colorado. When I started undertaking this bill, because there was, in the school discipline reporting, they omitted the shooting at Arapahoe High School when they published that report. Well, that's a pretty glaring mistake to make for the state of Colorado. And so I started talking to the school districts and law enforcement agencies and was told, well, this reporting really isn't a priority, so we're not doing it. I said, this is a law, and you are a law enforcement agency. And they looked at me and said, it's not a priority. And I said, okay, here, I understand how this works. I'm a renter. I'm term limited. I'm only there for 8 years. They're there in perpetuity. If they don't like what we pass, they will drag their feet until I'm gone and they can get someone else to repeal that law. So I looked at him and said, okay, I get how this works, but here's how it's going to work from now on out. The clock starts again because you have a new representative looking at this, and we are going to fix this. And we did get that through this year. It was painful and it was long, and they did everything they could not to get that bill passed, but we did get it done. And that, I think, is an unintended consequence of term limits in Colorado. Per the lobbying, they have the institutional knowledge down there. The mid-level bureaucrats and the lobbyists are the ones who have the history of what's gone on in the Capitol. It's not the people sitting in those chairs pushing the red and green buttons. You know, Dominick and I have been there for 3 years. We are some of the senior members now. So just think about that. Things have changed considerably in this legislature. And until we get the public to really start paying attention, and I challenge everyone, you know, come talk to us. Come down and visit the Capitol. See what we do down there. It's very informative, especially on second reading. I'm sure John would agree with this. It can be kindergarten on steroids down there, but that's how we make laws. And I would invite everyone to come down, see what we do. If you have an issue that's important to you, reach out to your representative and your senator. If you don't feel comfortable talking to your senator or representative, call one of us. But that's what we're there for. We are there to serve the people of Colorado. But it's incumbent on each of you to reach out to us to tell us what you need, what the issues are that you see, and how we can be of service.
Well said. Take some kaopectate, take a bar of soap, go down and watch sausage being made. Never let it be said that, albeit there may be a Republican flavor to some of us at Colorado Christian University and Centennial Institute, never let it be said that we didn't show our Democratic guests this evening the hospitality of having the last word, and I'll just thank you in advance. Representative Moreno, you've represented your chamber and your caucus very ably and helpfully to us this evening. So your closing thoughts, please.
Well, thank you, and thank you again for the invitation. I hope at least I point out that not all Democrats are bad. As Paulie said, you know, I get all my news from Twitter, so I don't know what that says about me. I'm a millennial, and I have a short attention span.
We'll talk about that
okay,
later.
Well,
in
she's going to teach me how to read.
Characters or less.
She'll teach me how to read a paper. So, you know, the past few sessions, I've looked at these statute books. And it's no longer one book or a few books. It's now shelves of books, of statutes in Colorado. And I worry that because of that, those laws have lost some of their significance and some of their effectiveness because there are simply too many laws. And you know, with 680 bills introduced this session, I certainly get that there's an argument to be made that there are simply too many laws. And so one of the projects I have over the summers, I'm going to start reading through all those laws and looking for things to repeal. It won't be Polly's law, don't worry. It's not. That's an important one. But really, I mean, I'm very much a person who believes that that laws, that the Constitution should be a framework for governance, should set up a basic structure, and then we can take it from there. But that's not what we have in Colorado anymore. Our Constitution has too much in it. Our statutes have too much in them. And so what we need to do, actually, I would love to lead a task force of legislators that go through the statute books and look at things that we no longer need anymore and start cleaning some of that up, because that's important. And I think when you continually just pass laws just to pass them, then people no longer respect the laws that you pass. And so that will be one of my missions here in the, well, let's see, the 6 years I have left, a little less than that, probably. 7. If I stay the whole time, I don't know. Sometimes I question why I got in this. But that's going to be one of my projects, is to look at how we can start cleaning some of this up and really getting to where our laws mean something again.
Well, you're my kind of Democrat. Let's get together afterwards. Either I'm talking you into my political party, or I might be forced to join yours. On your feet, friends, a standing ovation for these people. They serve us very, very honorably.